All right. Welcome, everybody. This is R.5 of the Co-Req part of the class, rational expressions. The first thing we want to talk about is finding the domain, and many people get this mixed up. The domain, what the domain stands for is what can X equal, and I have a valid answer. So domain stands for what can X equal, and I get a valid answer. And we always talk about domain when we deal with fractions, rational expressions. So we always talk about domain when we deal with rational expressions. On our calculator, I want to go to the calculator really quick and just look at our calculator. If I do 0 divided by 5, let me put a fraction. Fraction 0 over 5. If I do 0 divided by 5 on my calculator, I get 0. That's okay. 0 is a valid answer. Now, watch what happens if I put 5 divided by 0. My calculator says divide by 0 error. It's undefined. You cannot have a 0 in the bottom of a fraction. So you cannot have a 0 in the bottom of a fraction. That's really the key to this whole section when we talk about domain. So can somebody tell me domain? Sometimes it's easier to tell me domain, what can X equal? Domain stands for what can X equal, and I get a valid answer. Sometimes it's easier to tell me what X cannot equal. Can somebody tell me in problem 1 what A cannot equal? A, and this is the symbol for cannot equal. A cannot equal what number?
-9?
Yes, exactly. Because if I put a -9 in here, I get a -4 on top, and -9 plus 9 is 0, and on my calculator, that's undefined. It's an error. So the domain stands for what can X equal. Well, sometimes it's easier to say what X cannot equal. That means X can equal everything, every number, except X cannot equal 9. You see, it doesn't matter what number I put in there, I'm going to get an answer. The only way I get an error on my calculator if the bottom equals 0. And there's only one number that makes the bottom equal 0, -9. -9 plus 9 is 0. So it might be easier to do it this way. The bottom, A plus 9, cannot equal 0. So if I take the 9 to the other side, it's a plus 9. So if I subtract 9, I get A cannot equal -9, just like we have over there. Oh, wait. We said -9. I didn't write that negative. So A can equal anything. It just cannot equal -9. Now, there's a couple of ways of writing it. I need to look in the back of the book and see how they're writing this. I'm going to go there right now, see if I can find the answers. We are, what section are we at? 1. R5 or something. R7? No. Where are we? 4. I have no idea. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it just says x cannot equal -9. That's fine. Okay. X cannot equal -9. All right. I just wanted to see how they wanted us to write it. And there's several different ways of writing it. You can also write it like this: x can equal everything except 9. That's called interval notation, but we're just going to stick with this. Okay, good. All righty. So number 2. I'm going to say the bottom. Once again, it doesn't matter about the top. The only thing we can't have is the bottom cannot equal 0. 7 plus a, it cannot equal 0. The bottom of the fraction cannot equal 0. If I take 7 to the other side, it's a plus 7. If I subtract 7, I get a cannot equal -7. That's the domain. What can x equal? It can equal everything except -7. If I put a -7 in here, 7 minus 7 is 0. It doesn't matter about the top. You can equal 0 on top. You just can't equal 0 on the bottom. All right. Number 3. Uh-oh, a little bit harder. Okay. So once again, we're going to do domain. We're looking just for domain. Anytime it says domain, you take the bottom. We don't care about the top. Once again, we don't care. The bottom cannot equal 0. So if we have a trinomial like this, 3 terms, we're going to factor it. So hopefully you guys know how to factor this. 3 terms when the number in front of x squared is 1. We could do 5 is 1 times 5. That's it. To get a -6, I get a negative and a negative. That's a -6. And when I multiply -1 times -5, I get a +5. So this factors to x minus 1 and x minus 5. This cannot equal 0. By the way, next I want to talk about, before I move on, the 0 multiply rule. 0 multiply rule. If I multiply 2 things together and the answer is 0, let's say I'm going to do this twice. Let's say I put a 5 here. What number has to be in that other blank? What has to be here?
0.
0. 5 times 0 is 0. What if I put a 7 here? What has to be in the other blank?
0.
0. That's a 0 multiply rule. When the answer is 0, like we have over here, one of these blanks have to be 0, or they both can be 0. So I have two terms multiplied together, and it equals 0. So I have to say x minus 1 cannot equal 0, or x minus 5 cannot equal 0. Both of these cannot equal, one of them can't equal 0. So I'm going to get the 1 to the other side. It's a minus 1, so I'm going to add 1. And x cannot equal 1. Then I'm going to take the 5 to the other side. It's a minus 5, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. We're using our solving that we learned already. And this is the answer. So for this problem, the domain is, the way we write it normally is x, showing you what variable we're using. X cannot equal 1, or x cannot equal 5. So that's the way it's written. You have to factor, and you have to say each parentheses cannot equal 0 and solve for x in each one. So number 3, that's what the answer should look like. The zero multiply rules, when you multiply two things together, the answer's always going to be 0 because we don't want the bottom to equal 0. All right, number 4, same thing. You should be able to take the bottom and factor it. Y squared minus 9, it cannot equal 0. The bottom cannot equal 0. Two terms factoring. Something squared minus something squared cannot equal 0. Y squared, I'm going to put a y here. 9 changes to 3. 3 squared is 9. Then I have two parentheses, cannot equal 0. The y goes into the first spot of each. The 3 goes into the last spot of each, 1 plus, 1 minus. Sorry, I'm kind of writing down enough. And this is what I have. So now I have the 0 multiply rule. Two things multiplied together to equal 0. Y plus 3 equals 0, or y minus 3 equals 0. I take the 3 to the other side. It's a plus 3. I'm going to subtract 3 to both sides. And take the 3 to the other side. It's a minus 3. I'm going to add 3. Y equals 3. Cannot equal 3. So my domain for this problem is y. Y cannot equal 3, or y cannot equal negative 3. Do you see if I put a 3 in here? 3 squared is 9. 9 minus 9 is 0. Or if I put a negative 3 in there, you got to put it in the parentheses. Negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. 9 minus 9 is 0. So those are the two things that you cannot put in there. Two values that are not part of my domain. All right. I really hope everybody stays current. I'm begging you. We haven't gotten to the algebra yet in the class, even though it feels like this stuff is algebra. This is just the pre-algebra stuff. So that was domain. Now that's just domain, but now we're still dealing with rational expressions. The way to do rational expressions, and I'm going to do that, it says write the expression in lowest term. Oftentimes it's said simplify. That means do all the math possible. Rational expressions. There's only two steps. We factor everything that we can, tops and bottom, top and bottom. That's why we had to know how to factor top and bottom. That's supposed to be an and symbol. Step 2, cancel if we can. Cancel a top with a bottom if we can, if they're the same. So number 5, they factored it for us. Number 5, they factored it for us. So we just canceled. Do you see how a y minus 4 and a y minus 4 are the same? So they cancel out. That's it. My answer to number 5 is done. All I have left is a negative 4 on top and a y minus 1 on the bottom. That's the answer. We factor and we cancel. Number 5 already was factored for us. So we don't have to factor it. We just cancel. And what's in the parentheses has to be exact to cancel out the whole parentheses. All right. Number 6. We're going to try to factor this now. We're going to use rational expressions. Simplify. Step 1, factor. Well, it's two terms, but I can't put it in something squared minus something squared. First of all, there's no minus sign. If you look, you always check for a GCF first. Do you see how a 5 On the top, a 5 factors out. If I divide the top by 5, I'm left with 1x. If I divide 15 by 5, I'm left with 3. You see here, I get 5x. 5 times 3 is 15. So I factored a GCF out of the top. On the bottom, a 2 factors out a GCF. A 2 factors out. Divide both by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1x. 6 divided by 2 is a positive 3. So we did step 1. We factored the top and we factored the bottom. Step 2 is cancel any parentheses or any numbers that are the same. Well, these parentheses are identical. My answer that I'm going to write down is 5/2. So we factor and then we cancel. You have to know how to factor. All right. Are we okay so far, everybody? Yeah, I'm rushing through this again. Okay. Move on. Begging you to stay current, stay focused. Don't watch TV. I know some people are watching TV or doing other things. I probably would be too, but I know I have to stay focused on this. I can tell people weren't watching because they emailed me this week and asked some questions that we mentioned during the chat. All right, so number 7, we're going to factor. It looks like I have a GCF. I'm going to put the factoring over here. I'm going to factor the top. If you look, a 4 divides out a 16 and 4, a 4. And the lowest power x is 1x. So 4x divides out of both of these. 16 divided by 4 is 4. x3 divided by x is x squared. Here, 4x divided by 4x cancels to 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1. That's it. This looks like you can factor this at 2 terms, something squared minus something squared, but it's a plus sign, so you can't do that. So the top factors to the 4x, parentheses, 4x squared plus 1. On the bottom, we have 20x squared. That doesn't factor. There's no, it's only one term, so there's nothing that factors out of there. So we factored everything we could. That's step 1. Just factor whatever you can. I can't stress this enough. You have to know how to factor. Step 2, cancel. Well, 4 goes into 25 times. So we have a 5 on the bottom and a 1 on top. X and x squared. On the top, we have 1x. On the bottom, we have x times x. Do you see how we're left with 1x on the bottom? If there's 1x on top and 2 on the bottom, then we're left, 1 cancels out, and we're left with 1 on the bottom. On top, we're still left with 4x squared plus 1. Now, when you have a 1 in front of a parentheses like this and you have something, you can actually just erase it if you want. This is our answer. By the way, some people try to cancel out the x with an x in a parentheses. You cannot do that, because when it's in a parentheses, it's all or nothing. All or nothing. So that is the answer to number 7. Factor and cancel. When we do this, the factoring shouldn't be that bad, hopefully. But you've got to get the practice in. If you haven't been factoring, you've got to get that practice in. Question 8. The bottom's factored for us already. The bottom is done. It's a plus 5, a minus 3. It's already factored. The top, if you look, a squared minus 3a. Always look for a GCF first, and sure enough, an a, lowest power a is a. So if I divide both by a, I'm left with, there's 2 on top, 1 on the bottom, and a on top, minus 3. So the top factors were just an a pops out of there, and we get a minus 3. Step 1, everything's factored. Step 2, cancel any parentheses that's the same. Our answer is an a on top and an a plus 5 on the bottom. If the parentheses is by itself, like on the bottom, you don't have to put the parentheses around it unless there's another number multiplied by it or something like that. All right, number 9. I want you to try to factor the top and bottom on number 9. See if you get the same thing I do. Try factoring number 9. You've got to be really good at factoring. We're taking this test this week. You have to know how to, you got to get that practice in.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the final answer, it's just a over a plus 5. So why didn't you include the minus 3? What did we do with them?
Oh, wait. Oh, because we canceled it. Look. Do you see that and that?
Oh, okay, okay.
Canceled out. So we're left with a and a plus 5. We factored an a out of there.
Okay.
See, that's the a square and that's the minus 3a. You factor the top, and if it cancels with something on the bottom, it cancels. There's only 2 steps here. Factor everything you can and cancel anything that you can. And it must be identical to cancel it. Number 9, factor that. Factor the top and factor the bottom. I'll give you a minute and then I'll try it. So when you factor these, this is what you should have got, right? 25 is 1 times 25 and 5 times 5. And the only way to get 10 is a plus 5 and a plus 5 on top. On the bottom, the only way to get 6 for 5, 1 times 5, is a plus 1 and a plus 5. So once it's all factored, Once it's all factored, cancel anything that's the same. You don't have to cancel one top with one bottom. Those two cancel. We're done. I have a z plus 5 on top and a z plus 1 on the bottom. That's the answer. No, the z's cannot cancel. It's all or nothing when it's a group in a parentheses like that. It's all or nothing. Is anybody able to get the factors on this? I hope so. I hope you're trying to. Okay, let's try the next one. Any questions? Factor and cancel. Man, they're driving me crazy. I must have touched something. All right, here's more factoring. I'm going to give you a second to try these. And these are kind of cool because there's the 1 in front of the y square, so it's the easy factoring. You're not using the AC method, so it's the easy factoring. Hopefully it's easy. Let's see if you guys can get these factors. And that's all you have to do. You see, find all the pairs that multiply together, you get 12, 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. And which one adds or subtracts to a plus 4? This one right here, so that's my answer. 14 is 1 times 14 and 2 times 7. Which one gives me a plus 5, a plus 7, and a minus 2? This is step 1. We're done. Step 2, you cancel something that's the same if you're able to. That's my top. This is my bottom. That's the answer. Please, please practice your factoring because this is not the end of it. When we get to the algebra, we are going to factor. I promise you, we're going to factor. I'm begging you, practice this factoring. Study it. Don't practice it. Study it. You have to take this test coming up. Any questions on this one? You guys are awake. It's Monday. You should be wide awake. Let me guess. Tilda said she's awake. I can see that there's somebody chatted something in the back. Oh no. Good. All right. So some of you are awake. At least two of you. Let's keep going. More factoring. There's only two steps here. There's only two steps, factor and cancel. Now you just have to remember. That's why I said you have to stay current on the homework. If you didn't do any of your factoring homework, then you didn't practice this over the weekend. And then, so this assignment is going to be a pain in the butt because you got to still do the factoring stuff. I mean, you have to know how to factor or this assignment is going to be a 0. So the two previous assignments are factoring from this one. You know, the part 1 and the part 2. So 28 is 1 times 28, 2 times 14, and 4 times 7. Those are all 28. The only way to get a positive 3 is a plus 7 and a minus 4. So my top factors to minus 4 and a plus 7 with a y and a y. The bottom, 63, is 1 times 63. 3 times 21 is 63. You can put all this in your calculator and check it out. 9 times 7 is 63. And the only way to get a negative 2 is a negative 9 and a plus 7. So a negative 9 and a plus 7. So it's factored. We factor the top, we factor the bottom, then we cancel anything that's the same. We're done. Y minus 4 is left over on top, y minus 9 is on the bottom, and that's my answer. Now I know I factored these a little bit quick, but you can see that when there's no number in front of the y square, it's a quick factor. You just have to find all the pairs that multiply together to get 28 and 63, then add or subtract to equal the middle term. The factoring part is, you got to remember how to factor all the different stuff, things. That's why you got to go back to that homework and try those factors. Get it all right. Yes.
Sure. So it doesn't matter what power it's 2?
Say that again?
The y to the second power, it doesn't matter?
Yes, it has to be the second power. It doesn't matter what letter, but yes, remember 3 terms, you have to have a second power there. You have to have a square there. Yes, to factor it. And I'm going to show you that. Thanks for bringing that up, because number 12, the top cannot be factored. There's no square on the top. You know, do you see? It's only 2 terms, and you can only factor 2 terms when there's a minus between them, and it's something squared minus something squared. So the top of this cannot be factored. So if you look at the top, you can't factor it. There's no GCF. We're done with the top. The bottom needs to be factored now. And since the bottom has a number other than 1, you have to factor using the AC method. This is what we learned last time. Factor using the AC method. This is the A and this is the C. 20 times 6 is 120. So then you do 1 times 120. 2 times 60. 3 times 40 is 120. 4 times 30. 5 times 24 is 120. 6 times 20. 12 times 10. I don't know if I got them all. 8. 8 times 15 is 120. Which one adds up to 23? Adds or subtracts to 23. And luckily I found this last one because it's plus 8 and plus 15. 8 and 15. 8 plus 15 is 23. So I'm going to, by the way, remember this is that long 20x squared plus 23x plus 6. 8 and 15. You have to split the middle with 8x plus 15x. Bring down the plus 6. Bring down the 20x squared. Do you see when there's a number other than 1 in front, you have to use this AC method to factor? I mean, that's if you, and half of you didn't do this homework over the weekend. So you're looking at me saying, what, did he teach us this? Yes, we went over factoring the AC method last time. And if you didn't practice it, I know you forgot everything about it. Then we grouped the first two. We grouped the second two, making sure there's a plus sign between it. Factor out the GCF. A 4 factors out and an X of the first parentheses. 4 and an X. 4 and an X. 20 divided by 4 is 5. X squared divided by X is X. 8 divided by 4 is 2, and the X's cancel. Here, a 3 factors out. 15 divided by 3 is 5x. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Once the parentheses are identical, the parentheses now factors out. 5x plus 2 factors out in front. Whatever's left over, 4x plus 3. So this is the factor, 5x plus 2 and 4x plus 3. Do you look? We have a 4x plus 3. They cancel then. We factored everything on top now. The 4x plus 3 is canceled. Can somebody tell me what I need to put on top? Is it blank? Since the 4x canceled, there's just a 1 on top, like 9 over 9 equals 1. 8 over 8 equals 1. 4x plus 3 over 4x plus 3 equals 1. It's the same thing over itself, so it equals 1. So you had to factor using the AC method. You saw how much that I had to go through to get that AC method. The other factoring was easy, but you got to factor using the AC. Please practice these tomorrow if you haven't. Tonight and tomorrow. You got to get through this factor. This AC, it takes a lot of practice. Once again, I'm telling you, half of you didn't finish that factor using the AC homework. All right, we got 2 more to do. Let's do number 13. I'm going to give you a second to try to factor number 13 out. Try to factor number 13 for yourself. There's no AC method for number 13. Let's see if you can factor those. Yes, if the top cancels out, let's say Matilda, x plus 1 over 2 over x plus 1. Do you see the top cancels out and you're just left with 2 on the bottom? Well, anything over itself equals 1. So when it cancels out, it means it turns into 1. So in reality, I say it cancels out, but in reality, everything turns into 1, when it cancels. And then on the bottom, 2 times 1 is still 2. So when I say cancels out, it turns into 1. X plus 1 over x plus 1 equals 1. 9 over 9 equals 1. 7 over 7 equals 1. X over x equals 1. That top should have been factored very quickly because a is a squared, or I should have used a instead of x, sorry. And 36 is 6 times 6. The bottom, since there's a 1 in front of the a squared, 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6. To get a 9 is a plus 3 plus 6. A plus 3, a plus 6. That's it. When there's a 1 in front, do you see how quick it is? If you know your multiplications, it's very fast. If not, 18, you got to use your calculator. 18 divided by 2 equals 9, so 2 times 9 is 18. 18 divided by 3 equals 6, so 3 times 6 equals 18. 18 divided by 4 is a decimal, doesn't work. Divided by 5, divided by 6. Oh, we already have 6 times 3. As soon as you get a repeat like that, you can stop. The a plus 6 cancels with the a plus 6, and we're left with a minus 6 on top and the a plus 3 on the bottom. Once again, if you're all by yourself, you don't need the parentheses on the top and the bottom. You can keep them there, but you don't need them unless you've got another group or something else multiplying by it. You see, these actually cancel out to 1 over 1. And 1 times a minus 6 is a minus 6. And a plus 3 times 1 is a plus 3. So when I cancel those out, they turn into a 1. Everybody okay with that factoring? Did you recognize that the top was 2 terms, so you had to use the 2-term method? Good. It's really important. I can't stress this enough. A lot of people say, well, you shouldn't tell your students this, but I have to tell you because everybody thinks, oh, I'm just going to come to class and I'm going to pass. Every semester, half of the students in this class fail. It's crazy. Well, in the summer, half of the class usually fails because it's just too fast paced. If you have a life, if you have kids and lives and work, everything goes on and it doesn't leave much time for studying. But this class, you have to spend hours a week studying. And I always say, studying doesn't happen until the homework's done. If you're doing homework and you think that's studying, that's not. That's just doing homework, getting through it. Studying starts when the homework is done. Going back and try to do the problems again without any help. That's what studying is. All right, the last one in this section, both of these are factoring using the AC method. Oh, they wanted to make sure give a doozy. Do you see? We have to use the AC method because there's a number other than 1 on the top, in there, the 3 terms. There's no GCF. I'm always looking for a GCF to factor out. I don't see, there's no common number that divides out of there. So I have to use the AC method, AC. So I'm going to do the top first. 3 times 24, do you see? AC, 3 times 24 is 72. So 1 times 72, 2 times 36, 3 times 24 is 72. 72 divided by 4. 4 times 18 by 5, no, by 6. 6 times 12. And finally, 8 times 9. Which one will give me a negative 22? This is the only one that gives me a negative 22 and a positive 24 when I multiply, a positive 72 when I multiply them. So I'm going to put it down here because then I'm going to erase it. 3z squared minus 12. Hang on, I'm going to put it a little higher and then I'm going to erase it. 3, this is the top, minus 22z. I hate z's because they look like my 2's. So this splits up to negative 4z minus 18z. Then I have the plus 24 here, and I have the 3z squared here. Put a parentheses around the first 2, put a parentheses around the second 2, make sure there's a plus sign between it. In the first parentheses, 3 and 4, nothing factors out except a z. If I divide both by z, I get 3z minus 4. On this one, don't forget, the third term's negative, so you have to factor out a negative, and they both divide by 6. So I'm going to divide them both by negative 6. Negative 18 divided by negative 6 is a positive 3z. 24 divided by negative 6 is a negative 4. The parentheses are identical. So I'm going to factor out the parentheses. 3z minus 4. What's left over? Z and minus 6. In the other parentheses, my top factors to that. Using the AC method. I'm going to erase everything now in a second except the top because we factored that. I'm concerned. Half of you didn't do the factoring AC method. I'm concerned. Sorry for keep on harping on that, but I'm really worried. We got 6 weeks to go. These summer classes really take a lot out of you. They're quick. You get the credits very quickly, but you have to put a lot of work in there to get the credits to pass a class. All right. So I'm going to use the AC method on the bottom now. 3 times 12 is 36. 36 is 1 times 36, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, 6 times 6. Which one will give me a negative 16? Those two. Plus 2 and a minus 18. So on the side here, 3z squared minus 16z minus 12. This splits up to the plus 2 and minus 18. I like to put the minus 18 first because I don't like the third term to be negative. 2z minus 12 and 3z squared. Put a parentheses around the first 2. Second 2, make sure there's a plus sign between it right there. GCF is 3z. If I divide both by 3z, I'm left with z minus 6. See, put a 3z here, 3z here, those cancel, I get 6. That cancels, and I just get a z. Here, wait. This was a plus sign between it, plus 2, yes. A 2 factors out of there. That's a plus. When I divide each by 2, I'm left with z minus 6. The parentheses is the same. So the z minus 6 factors out first. And then we're left with 3z plus 2. Z minus 6 and 3z plus 2. That's factoring. Step 1. You had to factor all of that. Then we cancel z minus 6, z minus 6. That's it. Nothing else cancels because they have to be exactly the same for the whole thing to cancel. That's my answer. I hope I've scared you for the factoring on the AC. I hope I scared you. Because that AC factoring is tough. I hope you get some practice in on it. Get all the factoring practice in there. But that AC method especially is a tough factor. Got to remember those. Yeah. Like, I think Matilda almost said it. Almost said it. There's lots of steps in those factoring, especially the AC method. All right. I am going to stop recording.